Hi, my name is Phil Mason. I'm a lobsterman who lives in Marshfield, Massachusetts. I started fishing for fin fish in 1975. I fin fished till 1980. Then I got my lobster license. I lobstered from 1980 till I was 81 years old, which was 2 years ago. So we had a tragic accident, and my purpose today is to tell you about that, so you can learn from what I did to survive and what you should do to survive. And prior to that, I'm going to tell you some of the things I did ahead of time that helped me survive. First of all, I had a good breakfast that day. My fishing partner, who was lost at sea, had 2 donuts. I lost 9 pounds that day, which showed the energy I used just to survive. The clothes I had on, I had a river shirt from LL Bean. I had this Jack shirt on. I saved it. I haven't worn it since then. And I had my rag sweater and my rain gear. Boots. And boots and the rain gear are killers for you. The boots fill it with water, they'll suck you right down. And the rain gear acts like a wind tunnel in the water. You got to cut your rain gear off and get rid of your boots, because they just pull you down. Now the position of my knife wasn't to the left of me or the right of me, it was right over my crotch. I always kept it right over my crotch, because we were fishing out of a small skiff, a 20-foot skiff, and you didn't have time to do things. Things happen fast in a skiff. So it's right over my groin. I could catch it from I could get the knife from either hand. The water that day was 28 degrees. It was coming out of the North River. The North River goes up into Massachusetts, almost down to Fall River for about 40 miles. And it was February 9th, 1980 was the day. And there was a warm spell, and the river ice had melted, but the temperature of the river at the mouth, measured by the harbor master, was 28 degrees that day. The good thing was it was at noontime, approximately noontime. There wasn't a breath of air, wasn't a breath of wind, wasn't a cloud in the sky, and it was sunny and 33 degrees. That was critical to me. The skiff I had full flotation, so that even if it capsized, it would float. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about hypothermia. Hypothermia is called cold water drowning. What really happens is you would understand, because you all have hydraulic pumps in your boat to run your hauler and so forth. Well, your heart's a hydraulic pump, and it pumps out warm blood as you exercise or as you work to your extremities, and then it forces back the used blood to your heart. Well, if you're cold and your extremities are cold, it forces it back cold blood, and the cold blood will coagulate and be like jello and shut you down. My friend and my good friend and business partner lasted approximately 5 waves, and I watched him drift out to sea under the boat. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story. I'll tell you the whole story, in fact. So we were hooking in those days. We were hooking. We had a 20-foot skiff. We'd have 1,000 hooks, 2 gill nets, and we had jigging rods. And if we couldn't catch a tote of cod on the mouth of the river, the North River, on the way out, we didn't go. Well, that day we didn't stop the jig because we knew they were around. And what we used to do was fish the backside of a northeast surf. And you could zip in with a boat quick. You had a 125 horsepower motor on it. You could zip in quick, set your hooks, and get out. And then the bait fish were all stirred up in the course in that surf. And in 4 hours, we catch 1,000 pounds of fish. And at 50 cents a pound, we did pretty good. So anyways, this particular day, we were going out, February 9th, 1980. And we wanted to make sure that the tide had changed, because that's key to an estuary in the northeast. And what happened was, the flow of the river, the outgoing tide is on the bottom and the incoming tide is on top. Maybe it could be vice versa, I'm not sure right now, but I thought that's the way I think it is. And what happened was that the tide didn't commingle, it blew up in front of us just as we were going through the narrows. And we were caught in a place where we went from like a 4-foot swell to 20-foot waves in about 2 seconds. So we're in this vessel, we're going through the narrows off of the fourth cliff, and the boat flipped. Now, my friend knew we were in, when it flipped, it went up, it went up on the wave, and we were over the first wave, and we went down, and we were up in the second wave, and it just pushed us over. And one of the compartments I had never had a latch on it, so the water went in there and got the battery, and we were full of water sitting there. And my partner jumped out because he was afraid the next wave was going to get us with our hooks. Well, I threw all the hooks off the boat, and the next wave rolled us over. I held on to one of the gunnels and came up with a boat. The water was so cold, it was warm, if you can believe that. It was inviting. He decided to stay in the water. I told him to get out. I knew we had to get out. It was my training from the service. I was in the Marine Corps, and I was stationed on the side of Mount Fuji. I was a couple of battalion landing teams on LST and so forth, and we were told about hypothermia. We knew about it because Mount Fuji, I was in the middle of the winter, and it's friggin' cold, and I was in the tent. So here we are, the boat's full of water. The next wave comes over and rolls us over, and I looked down because I was right next to the boat, and I put my feet in the rub rail and walked around, holding on to the boat best I could to the stern and climbed myself in. And my friend and I, one of the tub trawls we had a buoy on it. It came up, and this is the line, part of the line we had. It's a course. It wasn't a lead line, but it was floating. So we used that line and made a lifeline over the boat from the transom to the tow ring. I told him to get out of the water. You got to get out of the water. He wouldn't get out of the water. So I got up on the boat with the line. And the next wave came and took me, and I only had one hand left on the line. And it was like a lot of you know, it was bubbles. It was like a salmon going up river, when you see those pictures of salmon going up river. And I had one hand on the line, and I said, if I let go, I'm done. I had tremendous force. It ripped whatever I had for socks or clothes. I had clothes on, but anything that was loose was gone. I lost my glasses, my hat. I already kicked my boots off because I knew that was a problem. I kicked off I got up on the boat, prior to this, I cut my rain gear off with a knife that I had right in my crotch I told you about. I cut the straps. And I held the trousers up to show like a flag, and I thought they were still there and they were gone. My hands were so numb, they were gone. And so here I am on the boat. I watched my friend go under, and he was never recovered. And I'm all alone, so I said, well, I got to survive this thing. And one thing that was interesting, I did pray, because even a Marine prays in a foxhole. I only said this, and I'll say it for you religious people. I looked up and said, don't fuck with me, but spare me if you can spare me my wife and kids. And with that, I just got a goosebumps. You wouldn't believe the strength I got from that. And I told that to a minister one time. He said, that wasn't a prayer. I said, how do you know? You never did it. So, but prayer's a prayer. So anyway, from that, I said I had to survive. And the key was, I thought of Walt Garrison. Now, you know who Walt Garrison is? Well, the old timers do. He was a football player for the Dallas Cowboys, and he used to advertise chewing tobacco. And he was a Bronco rider. So I said, I had this line over the hull from the tow ring to the transom, and this is the line right here. This is the line. I said, I'm going to use this as a bull rider. So I wrapped it around my finger like this, bob like this, and that wasn't secure enough. So then I wrapped it around like this, and around my hand like that. Well, I'm going to step forward a little bit in the rescue. The line was it's rough, They cut right to my bone in my hand. I didn't know, and I didn't bleed because it was so cold. It was just coagulated. So with that, I still was knocked back and forth, and I thought of Ohm's law. Well, you probably don't know what Ohm's law is, but Ohm's law is it says that current seeks the path of least resistance. So I applied that to the water. So I said, well, what I got to do is it's going to rip me off of this thing. I'll just kick my feet out, lay flat, let the wave pound me, and then I'll sit up again. And I did that for about an hour. Now I thought with the incoming tide I'd drift into the sandbanks and I'd be all set. Well, my anchor was out and we had it tied off so you wouldn't lose it, because you know, you throw your anchor out and you go, oh, there goes the end of that. Well, we had it tied off so it held the boat right in the surf line, and it moved in with the surf line as it moved in. Unbeknownst to me, the Davis family, who had 12 kids, they were out with their uncle, John Bradley, on Fourth Cliff, and he saw what happened, and he sent the 12 children each to a different house to find a house that was open in February that had a living person in it, so they used the phone to call the Coast Guard. Also, I didn't know Stevie Soanes, who lives on Trounce Island at the mouth of the river, was clamming that day, and he saw us go out. He knew what we were doing. He knew we were hooking. And he looked out and said, oh, those crazy bastards. And then he saw the green bottom, and he knew I was capsized. So he went from his, this is important because this is, I'll just say, he went to his skiff, started his Bruno, which was a 42-foot Bruno, stone cold, and came out to get me. Now I thought it was Bobby Nittler because the boat looked red to me, and his boat was green. So I thought it was Nittler. Anyways, as soon as he got out to me, I've been doing this kicking back and forth. People on the Fourth Cliff are watching me, and they say, oh, he's gone. Oh, he's back. I was like wibble wobble. You know how they whipple down, up and down. Now my legs, I kept pounding them against the side of the hull because I had no feeling. And of course, they were all, later on, they were all bruised. And so Sonesy comes out, and he's in his Bruno, and he breaks off his antenna to give to me. And all I had was that, I showed you my river shirt, and my jack shirt, I had a rag sweater, and I had the rag sweater over one hand, and of course I had the line on the other hand. Well, he came up, he thought I could hold onto that antenna, but I had no strength. There was nothing there. In fact, I could hardly talk. My jaw was almost frozen. So with that, he realized that it didn't work. So he was at the wheel at the time. He let go of the wheel. His boat stern came over to my stern, and he grabbed me and pulled me in like a sack of potatoes. And I weighed 185 pounds that day, around that time. So he got me in his boat. Now, again, for the religious people, I'm not saying I'm not religious. It's just that, as a side note, my mother died when I was 13, and I said to the minister, why'd she die? And he said, God works his miracles in strange ways. And that was no miracle for me, so that was the end of that stuff. So anyways, the people from Fourth Cliff, the Bradleys and their family, were watching what's going on, and anybody in Fourth Cliff who wasn't a summer resident was there watching this whole thing transpire. And they say when Sonesy's boat hit my boat, there was a circle of calm all around. There was no surf. Now, and when he got me and pulled me in the boat, all hell broke loose. But I want to go back on one thing. When I said I was kicking my feet out and laying flat when the surf came, you had to figure out when the surf was going to come. And the only way you knew was because you were being sucked out and up. And you could hear the surf breaking on other sides. It's like being shot at. You hear the bullet whiz by you, but the one's going to hit you're never going to hear. So the surf was away from me. I could hear, but when I was being sucked up and out, I knew I had to kick myself flat because that wave was going to break on me, and that's what would happen. So anyways, we're back to Sonesy rescuing me, and it was flat calm. he got me in the back of the boat, the stern, and ran to the wheel because all hell broke loose. And he got me turned around, and we're going in the mouth now. And we got a 42-foot boat that's almost pitch poling. So I was concerned that he was going to gas it. I couldn't hug the deck. I was like a snake. I had no strength to hug the deck. I was dead weight. I just floated around. So every time the boat's stern went up in the air, I went up with it and I come back with it. I thought he'd gas it. I'd be in the air and I'd be on the water again, so that I had nothing that I would be done. So I crawled up into the wheelhouse out of the sun. And as soon as I did that, I started passing out. So I knew that was hypothermia. So I slid back down to the stern. I kept in the sun. I had to keep in the sun. Now, as saying that, when they rescued me, I was facing south. So my right side was wet. My left side, which was facing east, was frozen. All my clothes were frozen. So as soon as he gets me into the boat, he brings me to the back side of the fourth cliff. And Larry Bonney, who's my harbor master and my neighbor, came out to get me. And he didn't realize he was so upset he couldn't tell me who he was. So I said to Larry, I got in his boat and I told Larry as best I could, take me to shore, and it was Doug that was missing, and that I got out close to the water. He couldn't go in too far because he'd lose his prop. I got and stood there. I remember standing there in about 4 feet of water, thinking to myself, this is fucking beautiful. This water is so warm. And the firemen who were there started walking the water. I said, don't worry, I'll walk out. Of course, I was all numb. My whole legs were numb. So I walked out, and they carried me up to the police car. And they put me in a police car, waiting for the ambulance. And the police officer, I think is now the chief of Situate. His name was Stewart. Awful nice. And I said to him, my feet were freezing. And I should have remembered. I should have realized what I was saying. But I was on the edge of coming and going. And so he put some heat sticks under my feet, which is you shouldn't do. You shouldn't do. And he shouldn't have done it. And I shouldn't have asked him to do it. Because right away I started passing out. Because what's that doing? It's forcing the cold blood up to your heart. So I took my feet away and I was fine. Excuse me. From that, they took me to the Thomas's house. Now, the Thomases lost their granddaughter in the '78 blizzard. They lived in Peggotty Beach, and they were being rescued, and she was in an aluminum boat with a baby, and the boat capsized, and the baby washed away in the marsh. So there was a little tragedy there. But Mrs. Thomas was very nice. I was in my underwear. I was stripped down to my underwear, and I was sitting in the window. And I said to her, can I call my wife? Because they kept saying, we got pool, we're looking for Mason. And I knew that's because they were saying, they couldn't understand what I was saying. And they thought I was saying something, and I was really trying to say Doug's missing. So anyways, she called my wife. I told her who it was. The cop says, we got Mason, we're looking for a pool, and they ran out. Now there's some humor to this whole thing. There's got to be humor in such a tragic thing. Mrs. Thomas said to my wife, she would call when the ambulance came. And my wife, who never drives over 20 miles an hour, waited up in the corner of Union Street and 139 between the gas stations there and the gas stations now. They weren't then. Till this ambulance went by. She had 2 boys. She had Peter in it, who's a fisherman. You all know Peter, and my son John. Well, the ambulance goes by. She whips out behind it, goes 90 miles an hour, crashing through the Route 3 all the way to the hospital. When they get to the hospital, and she runs up to the ambulance, and they pull out the guy. She doesn't even know who it is. That wasn't even me. So anyways, they brought me in the hospital. The doctor said I should have died when he asked me how long I was in the water. I wasn't really in the water that long. I was washed over by the water. I was on the hull, the top part of the boat. The boat had full flotation, which is important. And so I was being washed each time. Every wave would break and boom, I'd be soaked, and then I'd sit back up and shake it off, and the sun would get me warmed up again, and I was ready for the next one.
I'm going out.
Okay. So I'm in the this might be TMI, but I'm in the room now to recover. And an older nurse probably my age now, right? An old nurse comes in and says, a younger nurse, and I'm just getting warm now. They got a hot water bottle in my which I failed to mention, by hypothermia. You lose all your heat through your lymph nodes. So you want to protect your core body, your armpits, your neck, and your crotch. And I knew that. So that's why when I sat on the boat, I had my legs in the water. I kept my core as warm as I could. That's very important. I kept it out of the water, and I got rinsed once in a while. Well, we had a tug of war about getting the covers off me to get my underwear off, because she wanted to get me totally stripped. And once they did that, they took a cold urinal bottle and jammed it through my legs. I go, get the Christ out of here. Anyways, I survived.
Yay!
Stevie Stone said I was gray. Stevie has since passed away. He was a lifesaver, and he was just great. He was a great guy, and we were friends. Well, for ever since. I mean, he just saved my life, and that's about the story. The key, I guess, would say is that you want to get out of the water. The water's very inviting. Get up on some flotsam. I don't care if it's a pallet or a couple of totes that can float or whatever. You want to get your core out.
Life jacket.
And if you have a life jacket, wear one. I didn't wear one then. And I never really have worn a life jacket. I was always a good swimmer. The key is, if I had tipped over and tried to swim, I wouldn't have made it, because hypothermia. I would have forced that warm blood down to my cold extremities and forced it back. And that's why my friend only lasted about 5 days. He was treading water, and that was it. He wouldn't listen. He was younger than me. He was a better fisherman than me. And a lot of people knew who he was. He was a finance officer in Rockland Trust, and he put a lot of the fishermen in Situate, Marshville, Cohasset area in business with boat loans. But he didn't listen, and we've talked to his parents. I've seen his daughter. I'm friendly with her now, and it's all worked out. That's it.